Welcome everyone to our anniversary of Oratio. It's so wild that it's been 1 year since we've started doing this and preaching sermons. The very first one obviously was by our founder, Michael, who preached on Psalm 24, which is this incredible psalm talking about, the theme is like, who shall ascend the hill of the Lord, right? Like, who has the criteria to be able to meet God face to face and commune with God. And this psalm is really interesting. Like, as a Bible nerd and biblical scholar, there's three major movements in here. The first is that the first is God, or hearkening back to Genesis 1 and 2, where God has created the universe, has dominion over this creation, and has created humanity as sort of the prime essence of creation, and the encore of God's creation is humans. Then in Genesis 2, we switch from this faraway universe, sort of clandestine kind of God, to this really interpersonal God who's walking on the earth with Adam and Eve and establishing a very interpersonal relationship with creation, speaking to them, making things for them, creating this beautiful garden for them, this place of perfection that is disrupted, obviously, after Genesis 2. And then at the end of this psalm, it talks about, there's sort of this whole shift here where in the beginning of the psalm, it talks about, like, what kind of criteria does a person have to have in order to ascend the hill, to rise up and meet God and have a relationship with God. But then at the end of this psalm, God is on the earth and coming to us. It's a lot different. So my nerdy take on this, there is a lot more going on here, more deeply than the surface shows us in the psalm. There's a lot of literary characteristics, like parallelisms, and really a lot of poetry involved in the structure that's been done here by the author. So what this psalm really is that showing that the heart of true creation, in other words, like creation as God intended it, is that God dwells with their people. That there is this beautiful communion between humanity and God. This divine human communion is actually the climax of creation. As we know in Genesis 1, God rests on the Sabbath, the seventh day, the day of perfection, and rests with the climax and encore of his creation, and that's humans. But then the next set of verses in Psalm 24 is to sort of give us a way to establish the identity of those who may participate in this kind of reality of encountering God. Because for them, only then can the purpose of creation be realized, if we can climb up this mountain to meet this God who has all the answers, right? Who has all of the relief to our pain and relief to depression, anxiety. But the end of the psalm actually eliminates all of that way of thinking of, like, what do I need to do in order to meet God? Because now it's, at the end of the psalm, it's no longer a question of who could ascend. The reality is now really already here, and the question posed by the personified gates at the end of the psalm kind of functions to test this, given that now Yahweh is actually doing what the human desired to do, the human being Jacob in the psalm. And how are we to relate to these two juxtaposed sections? Well, there's a human desire to meet and encounter God, and there's also a desire on the part of God to encounter and be with humanity. So there's actually an eschatological and apocalyptic proclamation happening here, where it's pronouncing the coming rule of God, this harmonious new creation, a new city, actually spoken about in Revelation. And this kingdom is presented as being inaugurated by a unilateral act of God who redeems their people from their enemies and brings them to a place where paradise will blossom. Going again back to Genesis, but in a much different way. It's like turning Eden over on its head into this incredible new creation, new city, new garden, where everything is perfect and we don't have to worry about sin. So at the end of this psalm, the great moment of final arrival is portrayed as an act of new creation, now projected from the beginning to the close of history. And all in this one little psalm, you have something from Genesis funneling its way down all the way to the end of history, which is a culmination of a new city and a new beautiful life of perfection and harmony and peace and love and all those things we hope for. But what the meat of the story is the center, where the ultimate desire of God meets with the ultimate desire of humans, and that is to live together and to be in relationship with one another without scrutiny over humans' identities. So God is the one who comes to us.